You tear down the house, then you put up the rent. You pocket the cash, and you crush all dissent.
All right, so we're both a little bit overwhelmed, and we're going to take a 1 week hiatus from the podcast. But we thought instead of giving you no content, we could give you a little bonus content. So here is an auto recording of one of Simone's best pieces. You can find the rest of these on the Substack if you subscribe. We would love to have more subscribers. Free tier gets access to most of the content. If you were interested in helping us pay for our babysitters, small paid tier at $5 a month would be very helpful as well. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you very much.
Your pies will fade as you grow. Your pies will fade as you grow. Your pies will fade.
Why your $9 latte was never going to liberate anyone. The shortcomings of consumer activism. The unprecedented strike at hundreds of Starbucks stores this holiday season, the largest in company history, lays bare an old tension about how capitalism manages dissent, offering ethical consumption as a substitute for worker power. Starbucks sells, quote, ethically sourced coffee while illegally union busting. They paid New York City's largest ever labor settlement for wage theft while calling employees their partners. This is not a bug, it is in fact a feature. This consumer-facing ethos masks a systemic anti-union, read anti-worker reality, replacing genuine worker power with, quote, ethical consumption to build consumer consent for labor exploitation. As we enter a post-liberal world, we must confront this with increased militancy and seriousness. The original non-union white label. In 1899, the National Consumers League launched the White Label campaign, aiming to use consumer purchasing power to improve factory conditions. Manufacturers who met specific standards, including equal wages for men and women, no child labor, set hours, lunch breaks, separate restrooms, and submission to factory inspections, could display the white label, signaling to consumers that their products were ethically made. On the surface, it appears admirable to involve consumers in holding employers accountable to the treatment of workers. The standards were substantial, and equal pay was radical for the time. The inspection requirements indicated real accountability. However, the American Federation of Labor was not an ally to the White Label campaign. Why would organized labor oppose a campaign for better working conditions? The AFL understood what many progressive reformers did not. Consumer campaigns, however well-intentioned, fundamentally compete with and undermine worker organizing. The NCL was not boosting labor. Instead, it created an alternative legitimacy structure that positioned usually middle-class white women consumers as the arbiters of acceptable working conditions. NCL did not bolster working-class subjectivity. In practice, it was subverting it. This conflict came to a head when the AFL threatened action against the white label after the NCL refused to remove its certification from a struck manufacturer. The white label could effectively function as a scab operation by reassuring consumers that conditions were acceptable even as workers were walking off the job. In this way, the NCL's consumer-focused alternative could be used to break strikes by laundering manufacturers' reputations and encouraging consumers to cross the picket line. This early tension reveals the fundamental problem with consumer activism. It places power in the wrong hands. By centering consumers, especially middle-class consumers, but not just, who are far removed from the shop floor, consumer activism lacks the coordinating working-class power that can disrupt production and force concessions. Instead, quote, ethical production, including the treatment of workers, is commodified, transforming it, with effective marketing, into another avenue for profit extraction. The construction of consumer sovereignty. The assumed power of consumer activism is based on the idea of consumer sovereignty. In this framework, special labels, whether certified by external groups or by the companies themselves, identify goods produced under higher ethical standards, allowing consumers to influence the market and, in turn, production conditions, among other things. Traditionally, consumers are viewed as entirely rational, self-interested actors. They are expected to select the highest quality products at the lowest cost. If they can be coaxed to leverage their buying power to reward ethical businesses and penalize unethical ones, they could then push corporations towards more ethical business practices. This model is fundamentally flawed because it assumes a legitimacy, power, and independence in the consumer class that simply does not exist. For one thing, The consumer is a constructed identity based purely on consuming within a market. In contemporary capitalism, corporations have convinced people that consumption is the most direct route for self-expression. Consumers' choices are shaped and constrained by corporations that must, first and foremost, maximize profit. What is not available outside of worker-owned collectives are products that disregard profit in the pursuit of consumer preferences for, as an example, worker empowerment and standards of living. What investor would risk their capital on such an endeavor? Consumers are then only able to choose from what is on offer, not make independent demands for structural change. This isn't consumers exercising independent choice. It's corporations reinventing the concept of identity, including ethical convictions, as a marketing gimmick. Crucially, in the marketplace, it is the capitalists who mediate between consumers and producers, controlling how and whether they engage with each other. This turns what should be public concerns, how production in society is organized, into private contracts that at best transform workers' conditions into an abstract commodity. When ethical consumers choose labeled products, they're paying a premium that transforms workers' rights from a political concern into a private good. Safe workplace conditions, fair wages, dignified treatment, these become things that are bought and sold as opposed to political guarantees. The entire framework trains people to express political commitments through purchasing power rather than collective action. Your opposition to exploitation gets channeled into buying fair trade instead of building the relationship and social forms that could end all exploitation. What consumer power actually does. Consumer activism and social labeling don't improve working conditions in any systematic way. They transfer responsibility for worker welfare from employers and government where it belongs to consumers who cannot appropriately bear it. If consumers don't choose these, quote, improved conditions and aren't willing to pay the price premium, bosses are off the hook. Studies consistently show that while most people say they want to shop ethically, actual ethical consumer behavior rarely exceeds 40%. This isn't hypocrisy, it's structural. Consumer interests, price, convenience, quality, don't align with citizen values, and it's absurd to expect them to, especially since consumers are quite often exploited workers who can barely get by as it is. The 1990s explosion of corporate social responsibility illustrates this perfectly. Media exposés about global South sweatshops led not to stronger labor rights or regulatory oversight, but to a billion-dollar industry focused on corporate self-regulation. As neoliberalism gutted regulatory standards and offshoring was used to circumvent what remained, CSR emerged to preempt any attempt at binding reform. The ecosystem conspicuously excludes government, relying instead on corporate codes of conduct, specialized PR firms, and social auditors to reassure consumers that actual regulation is unnecessary. Moreover, these pressures apply only to multinational corporations with public images to protect, necessarily overlooking intermediate and unbranded products like the chips and the mined goods in our cell phones. Name brands offload egregious conduct onto subsidiaries or contractors they claim no direct control over and can disavow when necessary. Meanwhile, the labeling system presents consumers with incoherent information, both bureaucratic and confusing, governed by questionable third parties or by the companies themselves, with a price premium attached. Consumer, quote, power is a corporate creation manufactured through marketing. As public services become corporatized, consumers' desire to express citizen-like behavior through consumption increases. This desire is falsely fulfilled through PR and labeling. Consumers are not a powerful class voting with their purchases. They're a constructed market segment, being sold the illusion of ethical agency to reinforce corporate control over formerly public concerns. This helps explain why ethical consumption feels so urgent to so many people, even if it accomplishes so little. The moral capture when shopping becomes activism. Fair trade coffee, black-owned businesses, sustainable fashion, cruelty-free cosmetics. It's not bad to prefer these things. The impulse is genuine and people do want a better world. We're horrified by sweatshops and environmental destruction and racial injustice. And in the absence of functional political institutions, shopping ethically feels like something. It feels like agency in a world where most folks haven't actually experienced what real political power feels like. But your political energy, the outrage you feel about injustice, the desire to participate in something larger than yourself, the need to believe your actions matter, it's being redirected into market transactions. You walk out of the coffee shop feeling like you've done something meaningful. You've supported fair wages. You've voted with your dollars. You've expressed your values. And capital breathes a sigh of relief. It has found a way to profit from your convictions without having to bend much at all in its commitments to the shareholder. It is also relieved by what you didn't do. You didn't organize your workplace or join a union or show up to a tenant meeting or a mutual aid network. Instead of changing the dynamics of power and who has it, you made a purchase. You participated in the market. This is the logic of consumer activism as a political containment strategy. It quietly redirects your moral outrage into channels that are perfectly compatible with the existing system. You're not a threat to capital as a conscious consumer. You're a valuable marketing demographic. You pay premium prices. You're brand loyal. You do free marketing on social media, or just by walking around as a good person with a Starbucks cup in your hand. You've internalized the message that your power lies in your wallet, not in your capacity to organize with others and withdraw your labor. Worker power, the only power that matters. History shows us what actually improves workers' lives. Organized labor. Collective bargaining has won higher wages, safer conditions, and dignity on the job in ways that consumer activism never has and never will. This is because the power of organized labor flows directly from the fundamental reality of capitalism. In the capitalist mode of production, workers create all value. Every dollar of profit extracted by capitalists originates in the labor of workers who produce the goods and deliver the services. The entire edifice of corporate power rests on workers showing up and performing the work. This is precisely why capital fears workers organizing in a way it will never fear consumer activism. The conscientious consumer simply creates another opportunity for another product to reach a new market. A strike stops all production and all profit. Organized workers can demand not just better conditions, but a fundamental reordering of how value is distributed and who holds power in the workplace. Consumer activism offers corporations a release valve, a way to acknowledge concerns, make symbolic gestures, and maintain legitimacy without ceding structural power. CSR initiatives and social labeling schemes allow companies to absorb criticism while keeping intact the fundamental relationship. Workers create value, capital extracts it, management decides distribution. This is why companies will spend millions fighting unionization, while happily funding CSR departments. It is why Starbucks can tout progressive values while spending millions on union busting consultants to avoid paying their workers more. Consumer-facing ethics are compatible with profit maximization. Worker power is not. This doesn't mean consumer support is meaningless. Solidarity matters, and consumers can act as allies to organized labor. But that support is effective only when it's in service of and directed by worker-led organizing, not a substitute for it. Respecting a picket line supports worker power. Insisting your purchasing choices are political action reinforces the corporate framework that denies workers power in the first place. If we're serious about challenging corporate power, we need to stop thinking like consumers and start thinking like workers. If you're listening to this, you are almost certainly an exploited worker yourself. Your consumer choices are a poor salve for the alienation you experience from all the stuff you create all day on the job. Stuff that is taken from you for someone else's profit. Whether we're clocking in at a warehouse, teaching in a classroom, coding from home, or serving coffee, we create the value that makes the entire system run, which means we have the power, all the power we need to remake the world, but only when we act in unity as workers. That means supporting unions and labor organizing, including at your own places of work, and recognizing that the only sustainable check on corporate power is organized workers who can collectively refuse to produce the profits that fund corporate empires. Your $9 latte was never going to liberate anyone, but workers, organized and withholding their labor, can stop the entire machine.
As you grow old, your powers will fade. As you grow old, you're on the make, and you don't do regret. You're always out for what you can get. You think like a snake, and you ooze like a snail. Let the trail go cold as you swallow your tail. With your low rent skills and your heart of flint, telling your tales that are unfit to print. You're all weasel words, backed up by the boots, obsessed like the rest, with the promise of loot. Your pies will fade as you grow old. Your pies will fade as you grow old. Your pies will fade as you grow old. Your pies will fade as you grow old.
I love you.